Africa, There you go.
I think it showed up because I've former colleagues that were, I worked for a company that was South African. I worked for Vitality, which is owned by Discovery. So it showed up, I think, because of those colleagues, because there are a lot of them from South Africa.
So we just had a hose pull off the carbonator and flood the mechanical room.
Oh no.
Fortunately, I made it with a waterproof porcelain floor and a drain, and what trim tiles that are porcelain. So the water went down the drain, didn't harm anything. Blew a brand new giant CO2 tank into the air. So I don't know what we're breathing at the moment.
Wow.
So Junko's cleaning the mess up. Anyway, Larissa's not able to join us this week, nor Nadia, nor Matt. So maybe this is us.
All right.
So here we are.
What about Dorinta?
Larissa's had some conflict once a month, and I asked you guys about moving it to Wednesday, and they said we needed a unanimous support, which we don't have, so we won't change anything.
Okay.
But then Dorinka, is she going to be
here? I
here?
don't know where she is. She should be here. I don't know where she is. So I thought we could take a look at the quote homework assignment, and maybe use that to start some conversations. Let me see. I'm starting a new category here of participants via YouTube and ad hoc interactions with me. And I think Nadia's got problems with the time change, so I'm going to move her into there. And Fari, he's never been to one of these. Jonathan either. Jonathan's very, very active 4D provider. But I put these little things in to stimulate our conversation, assuming you guys would like to have a conversation in sort of the first 15 minutes. This work for everybody?
Yes, I think that tends to stimulate the session.
Yeah. So business cultures, here were the questions. I think these are all easy, but that's okay. I want you to provoke you to think about it.
Yeah, I think we went through this last night. It was actually quite good. I think there were a couple that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Well, there are not, the first one, of course, the business cultures are not green or yellow. Right, everybody's clear on that.
Right.
And go ahead. Go ahead. On that, what did you want to talk about?
I do agree that the blue for startups and the orange for mature companies. I think that increases the likelihood of success.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one was actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think these should mostly be.
I don't know. We got stuck on a couple.
Okay, go ahead.
So number 2, I think, was pretty straightforward. Oranges look to de-scope and control cost. Blues want to.
But by the way, the right way to do that is to have requirements that have a floor and a goal. And you start off trying to reach the goal, and then you reduce the requirements. That's the simplest way to reduce the scope and the cost as you improve your cost estimates. And just a little more about this, the early phase projects, the estimates are all parametric. And that's true of whether you're building Denver Airport or the Big Dig or Hubble. What that means is that you use, in NASA, we call them cost estimating relationships from historical projects, where you plug in parameters like weight and some estimates of complexity, and that's how you do your cost estimate. That's pretty much nonsensical. The real cost estimates, grassroots, when you the actual bids. So the house was done exactly the same way. The builder had a budget that he came up with based on probably just square footage and similar houses in the past. And then we got the actual quotes from the vendors as we went along. And of course, they're always higher. And so a little bit about project management. In the case of the projects that are blue, Hubble was blue, Space Shuttle was blue. What that means is that you're going to meet the requirements. The thing has so much public anticipation. People get angry when the cost increases and they fire people, but they pay it. So I find it really useful to think about the projects in these two ways. And we talked a bit about how important it is that everybody be on the same mindset here. Good.
Right. I think so. There was another word that you said in there, and I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah.
It was requirements should have a floor and a goal, but then there was and you called it. I didn't catch it. Otherwise,
Yeah, I think. I didn't say this, but
I can watch the video too.
A floor, which is absolutely so. If you're going to put in a solar panel system for somebody, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the house and say, look, I think we can put 5 panels and get you 8 kilowatts peak energy, and so you contract for that. Then someone says, well, is that the best you can do? And you say, well, yeah, maybe we can do a study and see if we can find a way to put a different thing in and configure it differently. And say, well, I'd like to do that. So now the thing turns momentarily blue. So you're going to increase the scope, and then people are going to want it to go back to orange and get locked down on the cost. They don't know exactly how much it's going to cost. Or you could have someone that says, what I want you to do is get on my roof and keep adding panels until you run out of space and creativity. That would be an example of a blue project, right? That's why I'll pay whatever it takes. I don't care. I think in your business it's probably 99% orange. People want a fixed price.
Yep.
And the things are similar enough that in the case of our house that they claimed they had an overrun because of whatever reason, and we paid it, but not happily.
Yeah.
But I think this idea that things so putting our panels on a roof is pretty simple, but building Denver Airport is not. But I think people got to be clear that it's got to be one or the other. And Denver Airport, I think, was confused about this.
Right.
They went into a fixed price arrangement with the legislature and everybody. Then they put in a blue baggage handling system. Remember this story?
Oh yeah.
and the whole thing got delayed for a couple of years because the system was too blue, unproven technology.
Yeah, it 8 bags.
Right.
Yeah, that was quite the experience.
By the way, there's another thing with these projects. I mentioned this. There's a study that Aerospace did some years ago that no one pays any attention to. I found it absolutely fascinating. They looked at 40 NASA projects, and what they showed was that the cost was not linear with complexity. Human experience is basically linear. We everyday life is linear. So we think that's how things work. It turned out that the cost of a project is an exponential function of complexity, not linear. And the reason for that is that maybe this topic interesting to you. This is kind of off the market track a little bit. Is this interesting?
I'm tracking. Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
sure, go.
So what happens is, as it gets more complex, there's much more interrelationships between the parts, and that's what costs all the money. So if you build an example of a house, a very simple house, then things are pretty linear. If you increase the square footage, by and large, the price goes up linearly with the square footage. If you put in complicating factors like spherical domes or maybe automatic shutters, things suddenly become much more complex because now you've got, for example, heating loads that are vary much more throughout the day than they would otherwise. That's a real complexity with the air conditioning system. So if you increase the glazing, and one of the issues with this house is that the diurnal variation of heating is huge. Today it's sunny, and this house, the furnace is basically, it's not even a furnace, the boiler is basically off because it's got plenty of solar heat and everything's getting warm, so it's getting slowly, it's 76 in here now with no heat on. And what's got to be done is before the day's over, we have to turn on some fans and ventilate because it has to move the hot air around. That's
Right.
another complexity. The heating system has to take this into account so that it can respond in the evening as it gets colder outside and the sun goes away. So all these things are nonlinear. And so this thing showed that the space projects, the cost went to an exponential e to the some power of complexity. That's why the Denver airport overran enormously, Hubble ran enormously, the Big Dig probably overran by many factors because people think it's linear when it's exponential. So as you go into a solar install, if it's the same thing you've done before, it's going to be pretty simple. The minute it starts to get different with more complexity to it, the cost is going to go up faster than linear. And that's where your company probably gets in a lot of trouble if they don't recognize it, you know?
Yep. The minute the train comes off the tracks.
It's not non-linear, so.
Yep. I
And
may have the team watch the first part of this video.
It's a simple way to kind of define what the problem is. It's not necessarily a problem. You just have to understand it, right?
exactly.
If you don't understand it, therein
Yeah.
lies the problem.
Yeah.
So the James Webb Space Telescope, I told you if I had been director, it never would have been launched. It would have been descoped. And it took 25 years and $10 billion to build it. And the initial estimate was 500 million. What happened? Well, it's very, very complex. And people looked at, said, how does it compare in size to Hubble? And made a linear extrapolation, but it's not linear, it's exponential.
Yep.
So, and you'll see this over and over and over. Anyway, I think it's interesting.
Such a simple concept, but is so overlooked and not widely understood.
So many things, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Dorinta.
Oh, okay, you made it. You made it.
Good morning.
Morning. So, does that sort of close off these colors with projects?
Actually, the number 3 was the one that I got stuck on most. And we may have already kind of covered this. So I'm still processing, but just the projects and similar process driven activities, do they alternate between the colors or must you select color?
They can't. It's interesting. So somebody's at the front door. I hope it's just a delivery. The point is that the processes are very different. So again, we're talking about major systems here, which is my experience. If you're gonna build something to that really challenge the state of the art, which these big space projects do, you start off with mostly blue people, and they communicate differently. And a project that's going to be blue throughout, you're going to have the blues much more in control and management jobs. They're going to be constantly changing things. They even communicate differently. Blue projects, the experts run the show. You can imagine this, that the wizards get up there and decide what we're going to do. The orange projects, the wizards are put in the back room. They don't want to be heard from. They're going to just do the standard grind the crank project management process.
Yeah.
So the point is that the processes are different. And so you can't, in fact, my example was a bad one with the solar panels, but you cannot in a major system with lots of inertia, lots and lots of people, you can't move between the two colors. You've got to decide what's going to be in the dominant.
If I'm understanding and looking back at my wonderful triangle note, if you're a blue project, you're selecting performance and then one of the other pieces, right? It's either
Well,
scope.
performance, I like to think of it as performance is in the driver's seat.
Gotcha.
So when a meeting comes up and somebody has a way to make it better, they're gonna win the day.
Okay.
With an orange project, the blues are gonna be put in the, as I said, in the back room. And someone says, well, I see a way to make this better. People aren't gonna listen to it. We don't wanna hear that. We don't care. Does it meet a requirement? It's a very, having worked with both mindsets, it's really different. The orange guys, just another space example, nothing gets put in the program unless it's got heritage. So if somebody comes up with a new computer that's twice as fast, the blue guy is going to say, wow, let's see if we can fit that in. That sounds cool to me. The orange project's going to say, what's its heritage? What's his track record of being in space? Oh, it's never been, then take that idea someplace else.
Gotcha. So then orange projects are either cost centric or time frame centric. Is
They're
that
both, because they're interconnected, but they're cost centric. But because of that, my expression was cost is in the driver's seat and schedule's in a vice. Any schedule slip costs more money.
Yep.
So again, if you're doing a solar panel and the guy installing it says, we just found out that we've got to route the cable in a different way, it's going to take another day. That's cost.
Yep.
So the two are bedmates, but the cost is what you got to do both, really.
But that's what drives it, is the focus on cost.
That's focus on cost is what drives it.
Performance isn't even in the room.
Performance is needing,
Okay.
except to meet the minimum.
That's helpful. Thank you.
The minimum.
That was kind of the big sticking point for me on the review.
Yeah, so again, back to the solar panels, if the guy on the roof says, well, I can see a way we could throw another panel up here. No way anyone's gonna do that unless you go back to the customer and they say, well, we're willing to pay more. It kind of simple stuff, but in a complex environment, it's missed completely.
Thank you.
Things in this new consulting arrangement are really becoming very clear.
So about attention. This clear?
Yeah, where attention goes, energy flows, right?
Yep. And this next one is an idea that's kind of unique to me. How do you attend to what's important? The conventional way says to list everything and decide you're going to pay attention to the highest priority ones. That never worked for me because I never had the time or attention to spend on the low priority stuff. So for me, it was simpler. Decide what's important and just focus on that, and just don't even never consider the rest of it. So one of my favorite stories about this is when I was back at NASA. There was a time when it became very, very popular to see how we could get money out of the space station program for the science projects. And all the divisions were busy doing that. I may talk about this again later. But at the time, I was fixed on the idea of the great observatories of 4 missions to cover all the wavelengths of radiation you could observe. That was what I was there to do. So I simply didn't spend any time on this. I gave the job off to someone who worked for me and said, go take care of this. As far as I'm concerned, you got my power of attorney. You're acting for me. I'm just not going to waste attention on it. I'm going to make the great observatories happen. So that's what worked for me. Now there's a risk in doing this. You might miss something important, but to me, it was a better bet just to attend to what really matters. So in daily life, think about what matters to you, whether it's your relationship with each other or whatever, and tend to that as the priority and let everything else, just ignore it until it pops its head up and needs something. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's what
It does.
That's what worked for me.
I'm a fellow blue, and
That's a-
I struggle sometimes with my focus, so that's very helpful.
Just funny as a green. I'm like, nope. This is what's important. The rest out.
I'm like, but oh, it's also interesting.
Too bad.
And this is this idea about, this is repetition, but I think it's such an important idea to do an occasional emotional check-in. You know, kind of like an interrupt on a computer. And so you just kind of notice that you feel good or not. And if you feel lousy, this is a very powerful notion. You're probably in a drama state. And-
Yeah.
That was super helpful.
And what are the two common drama states?
Victim and blamer.
Victim and blamer. So having made the diagnosis, here's the choices. This is an idea we're gonna, I'm intentionally putting ideas in here that I think are important that we're gonna dig in more deeply later. But the idea that victims need clubs.
Yes, you need co-conspirators to make you feel better.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right. So if you don't want to have victims in your organization, all you gotta do is refuse to join their clubs. They'll leave.
Yeah.
If everybody simply won't join the club. And it's exactly right, Tanya. They want to feel better. And then the idea that the thought or storyline is powering it. You can surface that and change it. And I think if there are two important ideas above anything else that make all this work, it's the capacity for empathy and accountability. This is so central.
Yep.
Make sense? Nico, you on board? Nico, you there?
Yeah, just very, very aware of the fact, you know, if you function in a green zone, you know, then a lot of this is like, you know, you're quite aware of it.
Yeah,
I'm speaking of
Right.
right from the top, you know, where you should be focused on a goal and what you want to achieve. But if your goal is like in the human science section, then you've got a different approach, and I'm very aware of it. I can think of so many examples, you know, where
Mhm.
the goal and the vision and so on, it's more about people than achieving a certain goal. So it's very interesting to listen to your questions and the interaction. So I'm just very aware of the difference. And obviously within the green zone, you also have, as far as I'm concerned, much more presence of the victim storyline, or people sharing that kind of conversations as well. It's more about empathy and who's got the saddest story and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's my contribution now.
So if I heard that right, Nico, it kind of sounds like because you're a green and you're kind of in the home base of how this pyramid of needs is built,
Yeah.
your perspective of this conversation is very different from mine, being a blue, which is further up the pyramid.
Absolutely. I just listened to your, you know, gotcha, and you on it. That part, that first part, I'm really going to listen to the recording again just to catch up on some of the things that you've discussed. You know, for you, it's like logic, it's your language, it's your world. And for me, it's the quite opposite. So I don't want to come in with a green every time when you're in a blue conversation. But yeah, it's for me, it's finding the balance between this, because obviously, you know, you need all of this in the world that I'm living in. You need all of it.
Okay.
I think it's
You can build a case for the Hubble. I mean, you need blue. There's no time for green now, you know. I want you to take the day off, go see your family. I mean, there's no you've got a goal. I can understand that. It's just completely different from my world, but therefore very valuable.
Yeah, and I'm feeling the same thing, you know, and kind of reflecting on some of the conversations that Tanya and I have had since we're, you know, both working from home. We'll each have problems and kind of reflect to the other, and be, you know, I didn't really understand why our conversations were so effective. But now hearing you, Nico, kind of reflect on this conversation is really kind of helped put some clarity around it for me, because Tanya will come with a problem and I'll come with a solution that seems perfectly obvious to me. And she's like, wow, that's genius. Like, I'm like, well, of course, like, I don't think it's that genius. That's like where my brain goes. And then vice versa.
Logic.
Right? I'll be stuck on something, and she'll bring the accountability and appreciation to it, and or the empathy to it, and
Yeah.
that really helps.
Okay,
Thank you. That's this.
on to these thoughts about appreciation. Anybody want to comment on this?
Well, I mean, for me, this is so important. It feels like everybody's, I mean, it's a fact. Everybody wants some appreciation. I mean, if you admit it, you can actually focus on it, you can validate it, and you can also then give it. And then, you know, just to see to it that you are serious, you're doing it with integrity and not just like stroke everybody's back. So
Yeah.
I think it's just very important.
How about feeling awkward when you first start doing it?
I think it may, but I think if you're coming from a place of authenticity, right? Like there was I think you had talked about, like, it has to be genuine. It can't just be like what Nico said, like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
paying some kind of generic respects out of the blue. It has to actually be applicable and true. And then
Yeah.
I think it's less likely to feel
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah,
And
for
that's
me,
something that people sense. There's really something about it. There's some research in this regard that people can sense when you are serious or honest, and you're not just like giving compliments for whatever reason. So
Yeah,
that authenticity, that's the word I was
and
looking for. Very important.
how do we make sure that it's authentic? What's our trick for this? Anybody remember? Anybody remember what's not a storyline is the truth of our experience.
right.
I use this simple example of it's hot in this room versus this room feels hot to me.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you live in gratitude, you actually experience it, and the truth of your experience is unarguable, the truth. And that's the key to making it authentic, is to live in the mindset of gratitude, AMBR.
Yep.
Gratitude.
I'm glad you guys asked for this. I think this is useful discussion we're having to go back over these ideas.
Agreed.
Appreciation is a business word for love.
That's a good one.
It just sounds so techniquey to me,
Green.
that whole, it just
So-
makes me
so
giggle a
green.
little bit.
Does it take more time to start appreciating?
No, I don't think
So what I say is, if you make it a habit, you won't experience it as taking more time.
right, because you're just,
We're back to your experience again as the deepest truth. So to make it authentic, fake it until you make it. Take acting classes or live in gratitude.
Living gratitude.
living gratitude.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think I remember often being told that when you say thank you to someone and like you genuinely feel that you're thanking them for something, it still can be really confusing because
Mhm.
people are, okay, well, that's great to hear, but thank you for what?
Yep,
So it's like we've been trained to say to people, thank you for, and then say
Yeah, yeah.
something specific for
yeah,
bringing up that idea. But it's
Yeah.
also sometimes when you do it, it's like, okay, thank you for delivering project on time, and the
Yeah.
person, well, am I not supposed to deliver it on time? What am I supposed to do here? So it is certainly, to me, it doesn't come easy. I really have to think about what do
Yeah.
I need to say.
yeah, good. Has to be specific. Yeah,
Just a comment. I've become very much aware of this. Now, whether this was at talks or at the university in America or in comparison to the South African culture, it's always very interesting for me to weigh up these two. How do I experience it? So whenever there's a presentation or a speech or whatever in America, they will always start, as far as I'm concerned, with appreciation. Even in conversations, there's always like in my environment, there's always appreciation, and then they will get to some critical analysis or thinking or questions and so on. South Africa, it's critical thinking right from the start, criticism, taking one out, and then as a closing comment, you will hear, and thank you very much for your work. You know, it is amazing to experience it.
we're gonna talk about how to make a four-dimensional request. And you go right through the needs hierarchy, you appreciate. So let me ask you this, if you're angry at someone, can you authentically appreciate them?
Gotta get out of
Yeah,
your store
I think
tonight.
so.
I never have been able to. So what you can always appreciate is the
Question.
situation. One of my favorite examples, I used to watch presidential speeches like State of the Union speech, because it used to be about the budget. Now it's just about nonsense, so I don't bother, but and the pattern was always the same. I would underline the speeches that went along. It starts with appreciation. And you know, and one of the most interesting ones, I watched Bill Clinton address the Republican Congress when they were impeaching him. So I wanted to see how he handled it. And what he did was he appreciated the situation. He couldn't appreciate them. He's mad as hell at them. But what he said is, I want to appreciate the difficulty of some of the problems we're jointly wrestling with, like keeping Social Security solvent and things like that. Then these politicians always do inclusion. Have you seen how they do that? They have the firemen on the stage if it's about 911. If it's about the things about race, they got the black school teacher up there on the stage with them, or in the audience, they call them out. So and then they, if they're doing it right, they have a vision. And finally, they make a request. So whenever I have a really hard situation, I'll go to the trouble to do this, and it's never failed to work. So I don't do this just, you know, routinely, but when it's a tough problem, I go to this method and never fails. I'll give you, so let me give you an example. I think you seem interested, Tanya. We booked a trip to Egypt some time ago, and Junko said, why don't we invite your brother? And my brother, I don't know, he's kind of, his life is as different as mine as it could be. He sort of makes his thing out depending on other people. He doesn't have any money, so I thought, well, it'd be a big treat for him. This is an expensive thing. He'd never go any other way, so I called him up. He hemmed and hawed, and so finally I told him, this is a trip of a lifetime. You should come. We're going to pay for everything. So okay. So we're going to China, and I'm going to be out of the country. And the way these cruises work is that they have a thing where we're talking like $10,000 a person for this, something like that. This is expensive. maybe 5, I forgot. Anyway, so it's expensive. So as you get closer and closer, if you don't go, you don't get the refund. You get to 1 month away, you don't go, you lose all the money, but no matter what happens. So it's really important to make sure you're actually gonna go. So I actually did things like make sure I'm not gonna put myself, like I didn't climb tall ladders in the months before one of these trips or something, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to China for a month, so I called him or emailed him and said, we're just coming up on the cancellation period, make sure you're in before we before we leave for China. Oh yeah, I'm good. I come back and now we're in the cancellation period, we lose everything, so I call him up. His wife says, oh, you need to talk to your brother. He says, I'm not going. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, he said, this truck hit these people in Paris, and I think I knew some of those people. I said, are you kidding me? You were in France 40 years ago working in a vineyard. How would you possibly? So I thought, okay, boy, I'm pissed off at this. So I called the company, the cruise company, and think I'm gonna try and find somebody to persuade them to let me substitute somebody. So she said, no, your trip's canceled. And I said, what? Now I've got Junko's sister coming from Japan for this. We've done all these plans for this. We bought airline tickets, all that stuff. Said, who canceled it? Said, you did. And I said, really? How did I do this? I said, by email. And I said, well, what's my email address? It's Mark Pellerin. So when he decided he wasn't gonna go, he canceled the whole trip, stupidly. So here we are out $30,000. And I said, can we reschedule the trip? Said, no, there's no, there's space on the boat, but the hotel the week before is full. So we can't rebook this. And I said, well, I'll pay for the hotel. Well, I can't sell the cruise without the hotel. And you know what the magic word is now, right? Escalate. So that's what I said. I got another lady and she's listening to the story. And I thought, okay, this is important. So I sat down and I wrote an email to her. The first thing I appreciated what the company does. I appreciate the situation we're in. Understand what I'm asking you to do is violation of your procedures. I get that. I know why you have them. It's a sensible thing. I'm not arguing with that. So I've checked the appreciation box. Now the inclusion. And I said, you know, we are at a point in life where we're going to spend a lot of money cruising. We're going to do a lot of this. And if your company will help us, this is something I won't forget. And we want to basically partner with you going forward as our main cruise partner, inclusion, vision. I think we're heading for an economic downturn and our resources are protected from that. So our vision is we're going to keep traveling with you no matter what happens in the world economy. We're going to be a solid customer. Check the vision box. Now go to now you make a request. Could you please reinstate our trip? And by the way, it won't cost you anything to do this. All we're asking for is a passenger substitution and work out whatever the problem is with this hotel. So she read it, took it up to management, came back and said, you're all set. If I just stomped my feet and complained, what would have happened?
Very cool.
Nothing.
Nope.
Can I come in here quickly?
Yeah, sure.
It's been a time that I would like to make a comment about this, and seeing that you are referring to Junko so many times now, and appreciation. So we had the privilege of having dinner together, and Junko was with us at Caltech there in 2014. And Charlie, I would really like you to share this with her. But it just turned out to be that I spoke basically the evening I spoke with Junko, I connected with her. And that's always a conversation that I will refer to or tell people about this amazing Japanese woman
Wow.
who came to America, you know, and Charlie is quite transparent about their story. but she was like fascinating to me how she adjusted and how she got into the situation. It's working for years. This was like mind blowing for me, and I really appreciated this woman so much. And she went out of her way with her English, to also have a good conversation with me. So that's the number one story that I always tell people about.
Wow.
I would like you to convey my best wishes to her.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, good. Thank you. Should we do a little bit of material?
We're gonna 4D salute it.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. On your feet. I got so distracted by the flood in the basement, lower level.
I live for these.
By the way, feel free to interrupt me at 30 minutes on this. I usually set a little timer here, but I was bustling around this morning. By the way, this does something else really important. As we get older, we tend to bend over and pick things up,
Yep.
and that's bad. So to remember to go down on sink down on your knees is a much healthier way to go down.
Excellent. Tanya's confirming your
Okay. Everybody okay?
doing good.
Be right
I was going through these. Let me see, where we ended with Dan Pink, didn't we?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we were meeting on March 21st and we finished on slide 321.
Fun.
I didn't realize that until, but
So this is kind of a fun one. As people move up in the organization, do you think their needs for appreciation are more or less likely to be met? What do you think?
Oh, probably less likely to be.
Less likely. Everyone that I've had senior managers, they'll say, yeah, it's less likely. And this is a kind of humorous, but is this some of the names we have for appreciating bosses? Departing CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. These guys have the house in the Hampton, the private jet, helicopter. They cite lack of appreciation as the primary reason for leaving their jobs. We all need it. So oftentimes somebody would say to me after I left NASA, they'd say, well, so-and-so doing such a great job. I wonder what I could do for them. I said, why don't you appreciate them? And they act like it's a foreign idea. Well, how can I do that? Wait, just send an email. I said, well, what if they name it like this? I said, well, if it's authentic, they won't do that. So, or send them a box of chocolates or a dozen roses or whatever, it doesn't matter. They need it. This is kind of fun. This is a 4D provider in Calgary, Canada. And I want to visit him occasionally. And one of my trips, he just bought a brand new Camry. And the car, when he turned the key off, it would give him an appreciation if he drove economically. And what amazed me was every time the car stopped, he would put his face down in the speedometer, turn the key, have a big smile. So we want to appreciate him so badly that even catching inanimate objects. Obstacles to appreciation. You wrote last year's date on this report. Aha, Swift. I enjoy pointing out your mistakes because it makes me feel better about myself. I wrote this last year. This will go faster if you say you didn't. About Bart Simpson's dinner blessing. Dear God, we paid for all this stuff ourselves, so thanks for nothing. Lao Tzu, be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. thankful heart is not only the greatest virtue, but the parent of all other virtues. He is a man of sense, but who does not grieve for what has not, but rejoices in what he has. So you're going to see more and more quotes through here from ancient scholars. This work is timeless, folks. More recent person, we are more heirs and heiresses to a society. We're all heirs and heiresses to a society of freedom and plenty. The most of us did absolutely nothing to earn. So I mentioned this kind of one-dimensional blue guy I worked for at the head of NASA. And every day it was going to be challenging to guide him and control him and avoid him damaging himself and everybody else. So what I did is I wrote my life vision and purpose in a piece of paper. In those days, didn't have smartphones. We had these Covey planners, leather books with little pages in them. And I've had about a 40-minute ride on the subway into work. So on the subway, I'd meditate on this to get me in the right frame of mind. So the first version that I wrote said I wanted to be wealthy. Then I realized that's a scarcity mindset. And if that's your mindset, you can never be satiated. And I also realized the time I had the most stuff was the time I was most miserable. So I changed it. I want to live in the experience of wealth, irrespective of how much actual wealth I have, was the abundant mindset. And that's where I live today. So with that mindset, I used to take, not so much now, I took the nephews and Junko's sister around the world on trips, like the example of my brother. I paid for kids' school and college and make my time free with anybody that wants it. And so the way I think about cost is opportunity cost. So the question is, if I were to take, and I did this, take Junko's sister to, for example, both sisters to Germany for 3 weeks to tour the country and go to the Christmas markets. What is it that I wanted that I couldn't have because I did that? And the answer is nothing. And so when that's the case, it doesn't cost you anything to do it. So I never saw it as a cost because it didn't deprive me of anything. The Native Americans culture is very big around here. They lived here. Jewish people, but not how much they have, but how much they give. Wealth consists not in having many possessions, but having few wants. I love this. I saw this on a greeting card in Boulder. If you're not happy with what you already have, how could you be happier with more? When I first moved here, Ron Billingsley, who was a professor in the English department and advisor to another leadership program, befriended me. And at the time, I didn't know anybody in Boulder. He and his wife were very private individuals. And they had me, not Junko wasn't around then, had me over to their house for the holidays, Christmas or Thanksgiving and whatever. And I was usually the only guest. He'd open the refrigerator door and show me a bottle of Cordon Bleu champagne. And he said, just so you know, Charlie, that's not for you. After you're gone, the wife and I are going to take that up to the bedroom and drink the champagne and you know what. And I said, okay, well, you know, that's good. So I left the university after my 2-year appointment ended and moved where we live now, 5 miles out of town, out of the city. I didn't have any contact with Ron for about 10 years. And one day, his birthday pops up on my calendar. I don't know quite how it happened, but there it is. So I said to Junko, I said, this is an abundance opportunity, and she understands this. I said, what I'd like to do is buy 2 cases of Cordon Bleu champagne, leave it on Ron's doorstep with no note. So she said, okay, let's do that. So I did. And that day, nothing happened. Next day, oh, by the way, so that's why the 4D stuff is free too. It's a matter of serotonin. So Ron calls me up next day. I see it in the caller ID. Pick up the phone and say, hey, Ron, how you been? It was you. I said, how are the boys? He has 2 kids in college. I said, it was you. Are you still at CU? It was you. No matter what I said, all he would say was, it was you. And I said, okay. I'm busted. How'd you figure it out? He said, well, I made a list of everybody who knew when my birthday was and put it on a piece of paper, and that wasn't very long. I put a check mark by the people who knew about the Cordon Rouge, and the list got shorter. Then I said, who'd be crazy enough to do this? It was you. So, well, I've gotten more of a kick out of that story than I ever would have from drinking the champagne, so. And the same thing with the 4D stuff. Bob Dylan, what's money? A person who successfully get up in the morning and get to bed at night, and in between do what they want to do. Isn't it that simple?
No.
So I found that gestures are far more impactful than material gifts. And the way I got this was when I go to China, they would do little things like that, insist on carrying my little briefcase. Now so I could carry it. And open the doors, and then the appreciation, I get standing ovations at the end of the workshops at the breaks. And people coming up to me and wanting to hug me, and the men and women whisper in my ear, I love you, Charlie. So the gestures are huge. So I was thinking about this, and think about Junko and I both watch classical music. Think about the complexity of leading an orchestra. It's all done with gestures. They don't say a word. So how about, appreciate Junko by doing their job. So if you're married or living together, everybody has kind of their job description after a while, right? The things they do. So one of Junko's jobs is to do the dishes. So I might just get up and say, I'll do the dishes. Or one of my jobs is to take the trash cans down to the street. Once in a while, I'll get up and look down there. She's already done it. This is big stuff. When I was first discovering this, yeah, go ahead.
Did you notice Nat just got a pat on the back?
No, I didn't notice. It's just your appreciation. Good.
I guess.
Tanya's a good student. So when I first discovered this, many years ago, I had a $50 a month budget for just doing things for people that didn't expect. So I would take someone out to lunch and pay for it. I would take people out to Sunday breakfast that were just friends or acquaintances, and they were surprised by it, or just help somebody at work or be a friend. And I think it's just fun to try and joke when you can. A ham sandwich walks into a bar and orders a beer. The bartender says, sorry, we don't serve food here. So I want you to reflect on what you're grateful for. For me, I won the lottery in 1967. Not that lottery, a more important lottery. NASA hired me. And then I've had wonderful chances to get all kinds of education somebody else paid for. The 4D system is enriching. And that's the typical Chinese response at a workshop. The whole audience, hundreds of people on their feet. Grateful for Junko. That's New Year's dinner Japanese style. We don't do it anymore, but when we did, it was a hoot. And my two children. And I'm grateful for the fact that every day I can eat fresh vegetables and fruits. Louis XIV couldn't. This is a unique time in history. And you can eat things that are in season someplace in the world. Travel, this is us in Egypt, the pyramids. And just grateful to be alive every day. So here's how this works. You can choose to focus your attention on what you have or what you don't have. And so when I worked as a consultant, I would frequently encounter a group of massively unhappy people. Typically, I worked in proposal operations. They lost the win they were supposed to get. So here's what I would do. I would walk in the room, sit down, maybe 10 people in the room, and I'd say, and I'm a consultant, so they don't have to listen to me. I'd say, we're going to go through the room, and I want each of you to talk about what you're grateful for to work in proposal operations at TRW. And would you start, please? And people could do it. And that go around the room and they would talk about this. And by the time we went through the cycle, the mood was completely different. It shifted everything. So simple, to bring them back to gratitude. So I'm gonna ask you to go to your workbooks and write what you're grateful for in your workbooks. And we'll have the report outs verbally to each other in next week's session. We'll have Larissa back and Matt back. And so I think with a few minutes to go, I'll just stop here and have open mic for any comments anybody wants to make about anything.
The first thing I'll share is just these discussions at the beginning of the session have been wonderful. Particularly for me, I think because it takes me a week to process a lot of this, and then these conversations allow me to close the loop better. So I really am thankful, particularly this week, for Nico's perspective. That really turned on a light bulb for me.
Nice. Thank you, Nico. Thank you, Matt.
Ladies first,
Look at that smile
before
you're
I
giving.
go.
No,
Tanya, Darinka, you wanna go?
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Darinka, you've been pretty quiet. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. You know what? I prepared the whole appreciation thing and I didn't want to send it last night because it was quite late when I was done. And then today, well, I have few Zoom accounts and I think I have to go and delete them all. So, and reinstall, so because I'm now on a work computer versus my personal, so my apologies for bothering you with that. But yeah, it's for me, it's really it's a blessing to hear anything from Charlie, but it's also interesting to hear all these different experiences and how everyone brings something. What I wanted to talk about is perhaps the difference, something that was touched upon when Nico was talking about culture in South Africa. So, for example, for me, growing up, well, the parents were saying that don't express too much affection to the children, they will become spoiled. Very seriously, that was the thing. Also, you as an employee, you're not supposed to talk about your work. It is your boss's job. And it is your boss's job to do it mostly when something goes wrong. So, right? So you were trained that if nobody is telling you anything, carry on. Right? So now you can, and I heard of number of cultures that do the same thing. So when somebody like that transitions, and the younger you are, the easier it is, but the older you are, it's more ingrained in you. So when I remember first time when I did something at work and my boss said, oh, this was a great job, you did this, and I was like, really, I can imagine the look on my face, right? Like, what has happened? Because I was thinking, what is coming after? Because I was still expecting that I've done something bad and we'll get there. But it's also, just to close off me talking, it is also interesting, a colleague of mine from China, one day she comes into my office, shuts the door and says, look, you have children. Can you explain to me, what does this thing mean in Canada? Kids should have fun at school. Like, what fun? School is school. You gotta study hard and you have to be prepared for your work. And that's the mindset. Yeah. So I think it's ingrained in a lot of cultures quite differently.
You got the last word?